Achieving the King's Dream. Generally, I have a chance to give at least one Martin Luther King related speech each year, and so it's a time of reflection for me. I try to read some things that I haven't read about King, a different sermon, a different text. Last year, and I highly recommend Tavis Smiley's book about the last year of King's life called Death of the King. It's very powerful. So that's one of the readings I would suggest. So a lot of time thinking about it, and as I think about a speech, I never really even over the years thought that I would give a speech about King and a dream. In fact, I really have sort of bristled at that. When I was in the 12th grade, the Elks Oratorical Contest in Atlanta, I won my school's contest. Almost didn't win that because my mom was one of the judges. And so in order to be fair, she scored me so low I almost lost because the other judges had perfect scores. And I still look at her today like, if I would have lost that, we would have had some issues. But so at the city level, there are these three finalists, a young lady, myself, and I talked about athletics. Talked about athletes, mega bucks, and micro knowledge, which you still have a lot of that going on today. But there was this little dude who talked about the dream. And I'll never forget him in his little too tight white suit that he had on, and he hooped and hollered, and the people were loving it. And so he won. And I'm still mad about that today, if you could tell. And there was a woman sitting in front of my mom who was talking about me. She said, that boy was good, but he just didn't talk about the dream. So I was like, I don't ever want to talk about dream. I don't like that speech. And even my friend Michael Eric Dyson says that in his book about King, that we should have a moratorium and not even play or read that speech because we take it out of context. But I think about the dream because particularly in higher education this past fall, it should have been a wake-up call for us of all the things that have happened. We can even start right here in this state. Hunger strike, these images nationally of these students, just tears coming from their eyes and pain. Their forceful confrontations of a president, football team rallying together, boycotting on top and leading to resignations. We've seen boycotts and protests from coast to coast. Ithaca College, Emory University, where I used to work, North Carolina, Chapel Hill, KU, Yale, Oberlin. This follows several years that we've seen students of color chronicling their challenges publicly using social media. Being black at Michigan, students at Harvard holding up placards, I too am Harvard, showing the things that have been said to them by other Harvard students, like, are you an angry black woman, or can you read? Or the students at UCLA, the black men who indicated that there are more championships at UCLA than there were black men in the freshman class. So I've been thinking a lot about King in that context, about the intense media scrutiny into his private life, the abuse he suffered at the hands of law enforcement, the personal demons that he wrestled with, that partly may have led to his life being cut short. And the words from his most famous, most quoted speech or message, if you will. Can we all just get along? Oh, y'all thought I was talking about Martin. I'm talking about Rodney now. Because see, this summer we had this movie, Straight Outta Compton, that came out that chronicled a period of time when this group NWA was out when I was a college student. And it reminded us of all the things that were happening at that time that we're seeing today, things that Dr. King experienced. And so in some odd way, there is this linkage between Martin Luther King and Rodney King. And so for a few minutes today, I sort of want to explore Martin's dream within the context of Rodney King's nightmare and how we can move from just getting along to building community, okay? Y'all never thought y'all were going to hear Martin Luther King and Rodney King just link like this, okay? We'll see if it works for you. So the first thing we have to do if we're going to make this move from just getting along to having community is that we've got to understand fundamentally that hurt people hurt people. We've got to understand that. In Dr. King's trial sermon at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery in 1954, he says, "The prayer that every man should learn to pray is, Lord, teach me to unselfishly serve humanity. No man should become so involved in his personal ambitions that he forgets that other people exist in the world. Indeed, if my life's work is not developed for the good of humanity, it is meaningless and godless. Rodney King wrote a book before he died called The Riot Within. In that book, he gives his story, his father being an alcoholic and how he worked these graveyard shifts cleaning buildings. And so how he would get Rodney King and his brother to work the graveyard shift with him because he's there drunk. So his boys are actually doing the cleaning while he is there. And then they still had to go to school the next day. So they are sleep deprived. And so naturally the schools labeled them as being slow. He gets involved in athletics. He starts playing baseball. His teacher molested him. Rodney King started drinking at 11. He drops out of high school during his senior year. He had already been held back once. And in this autobiographical book, Rodney King says, I was a defective, broken boy. In fact, there are epidemic levels of self-hatred in our communities. And with all of the social service organizations and churches and fraternal groups and civic groups that are claiming that they address these issues, it's not getting better. We are failing to address these issues. Rodney King goes on to say, I believe that hate is the most powerful, destructive emotion. It deadens our spirit and drives the soul into darkness. For many years, I fostered an intense hatred, and it was one of the factors that created a riot within me. I could never quell the chaos that reigned inside, nor did I even want to. And so some of the pain that we're seeing on campuses from these students is a result of the things that they have taken in, that they have seen that have happened all across the country, particularly to young people who look like them. It's the impact of a Trayvon Martin. It's the impact of a Michael Brown. It's the impact of a Freddie Gray. It's the same pain I experienced as a student at the University of Georgia in the mid to late 1980s. The name calling on the campus, the prominent rebel flags, Yusuf Hawkins, Amadou Diallo, Rodney King. We have to create communities with enough love that helps to heal those who are hurting. So that becomes the first thing that we have to do. And so how do we create a space in this space and on these campuses so that we're able to address those that are hurting? How do we open ourselves up so they recognize this is someone that I can engage with when I am hurting? Because there are people here as a part of Metropolitan Community College who are in pain. I know it as a person who has been a president of two small historically black institutions, and because of how I operate, I always tell people the scariest thing that ever happens to me is if a student comes to my office and they say, can I close the door? Because I know I'm about to get it all. It's like when you deal with a student who I've sort of adopted as a non-biological child, who talks about her family situation growing up in Chicago, where her mother tells her that one man is her father, but that man turns out not to be her father. And then she finds out who her real father is, and she can't even have a relationship with him, and she's upset with her mother, so she always calls her mother by her first name. And the man who is technically her biological father, she refers to him as that man whose last name I have. That's a pain that she carries around. Every time we talk about it, she has Thanksgiving with us all the time. She just finished graduate school in Florida. She said, yeah, I'm going to do my book. I said, I know, and I know what the title is. That man whose last name I have. Or you're dealing with students who say, as a freshman, my mom has told me, I just started school. I'm from New Orleans. By January, she's cutting me off. I've got to have a place to go. I don't have enough financial aid to live on campus. They dump all of this on you. How do you deal with that now that she is insecure? And we're seeing this all over with the number of homeless students that's coming out. We're finding out on college campuses. Students here who are probably sleeping in their cars. And it's not just the students, because sometimes as a president, I'm pushing and I'm telling our faculty and staff that, we've got to make sure we put ourselves in a position to help these students. When I have to realize, and this is the preacher's kid in me, that there are faculty and staff members that are in just as much pain. I had a staff member at my last institution. I don't know why she came to the office, but we're having a conversation and it comes out that she's involved in a domestic violence situation. She's getting beat down. How does she serve the students when she's dealing with her own stuff? Or a current employee who is working in custodial services, and yet her daughter, who should be able to take care of her own family, is putting pressure on the mom to help pay her bills. How can she provide service when she's trying to take care of that? And her husband just had a heart attack not that long ago, so she's dealing with him. So those of us who are in a position to be able to address those situations, we have to make ourselves available. We can't just worry about us all the time, because that's not community. We got to be able to connect. So that's the first thing. Secondly, we've got to overcome our snobbishness. There's a book by Lawrence Otis Graham called Our Kind of People, and he chronicles black middle and upper class communities all across the country. Very interesting book, and he talks about, particularly in these communities, that there are certain churches that you would go to, or certain schools that you would attend, or social clubs, or even fraternities and sororities. Well, I guess he got that right, because he mentioned Alpha as a part of that, and so that had to be part of it. So he talks about this. But the challenge is, in our effort sometimes to be elite, we don't see the Rodney Kings that are around us, because we're trying to be here, and we can't even see the Rodney Kings. You've heard of Martin Luther King's sermon called The Drum Major Instinct, one that people have to be careful about, because a lot of people don't read that speech, and they start giving people drum major awards. I'm like, you don't even know what that speech is about, because it's really about controlling that drum major instinct, controlling the instinct to be out in front. So when we start giving people this drum major award, that's what he's sort of like saying, no, you got to control that. In the speech, he says, now the other problem is when you don't harness the drum major instinct, this uncontrolled aspect of it is that it leads to snobbish exclusivism. And you know this is a danger in social clubs and fraternities. I'm in a fraternity. I'm not talking against them. The danger is that they can become forces of classism and exclusivism, where somehow you get a degree of satisfaction because you are in something exclusive. And that's fulfilling. So it ends up, a very exclusive kind of thing. And he then talks about preachers and their anniversaries and the wheelbase of their car. He goes in on everybody, that everybody's trying to be this. And in our church, we got so many doctors and so many. He's like, yeah, you need to have all that, but you got to deal with the people. I would argue that there is a snobbishness that is found even in higher education. Well, I'm a president, and there are certain things that should be afforded to me because I am the president. Or we're in the cabinet level people. Or we have faculty members who, I get on everybody because I'm going to run right out of here and catch this flight and go back to New Orleans. So I just say what I got to say. Faculty members who are so arrogant that they refuse to use new technology, and so they teach an iPod download on-demand generation using 8-track techniques. Because we're the faculty. When I was at Albany State, I had a faculty member once say, look, the faculty, we are the university. Presidents come and presidents go. Students come and students go. But the faculty will always be here until we retire or die, and neither hardly happens. So sometimes in higher education, those of us responsible for this enterprise feel like we always know what's best, and we don't have to adapt, and people have to adapt around us. So we become snobbish. My mom started off in computer software in Atlanta. She's a graduate of Berkeley. She has a master's in Christian education, and so she taught religion and philosophy at Clark Atlanta University. And teaching at a HBCU, you have a lot of students from all across the country. And so we always had some of her students at our house for Thanksgiving dinner because they couldn't go home for Thanksgiving and for Christmas. A couple years ago, we do it at our house too. We had about 15 students this year. We had 25 last year. It was too many. I was like, y'all ate up all the food, no leftovers. I'm cutting back. It was like that next day, I need to get a little turkey sandwich, something. You know what I'm saying? So I told my wife, like, 25 is too many. My kids love it, though. Who the students coming over? So that's something that we continue as our family. So there was always students at our house for Thanksgiving. And so one year she said, I got this student in my religion class that's coming over, and I'm excited she's going to be able to have dinner with us, because she has to work. I'll deal with this. Students would work. And so then my mom was telling me more about her and then told me what the girl did, her job. And she said, yeah, she didn't use this term, but she said, she's an ecdesiast. And, I think it's important for her to have Thanksgiving dinner with us. My mom, the preacher's wife who teaches religion. I was like, Mom, I don't know about this girl coming to our house, being an ecdesiast. I don't know what that. She was like, look here, this is my house. She coming to my house for dinner. You're going to have to get over it. Y'all know what an ecdesiast is? Let me help you. You familiar with the ballet, right? So this is sort of like, ballet has ballerinas. This would be sort of like the urban ballerinas. So, at the ballet, the ballerinas dance in tutus, and the ecdesiast dances fabric free. So in the ballet, the music is Tchaikovsky and Johann Sebastian Bach, and the ecdesiast dances to 2 Chainz. Y'all got it? Okay. So the fascinating thing is that my mom, the religion teacher, the pastor's wife, has a relationship so that this student who makes money as an urban ballerina has told her this. How powerful is that kind of relationship? Where she's saying, I feel this person's not going to judge me, and in fact, bring me in. And I was the one trying to be snobbish. I was telling some of the brothers in my chapter what my mom was doing. They were like, can we come for dinner too? So we've got to get past this snobbishness because we have the hurt people who are on campus, the Rodney Kings. And if we're being snobbish, we can't even see them. So we are going to just try to get along because we won't form community like that. Finally, then, we've got to move from having a spirit of demanding to a spirit of dialogue. So here we go. Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream speech. The 34 words that are mentioned the most in that speech about the day when his children can hold hands with other children and people will be judged by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. But of course, hopefully you've read the entire speech. That's just a small part of the speech where he deals with a lot of the challenges, where he's challenging the country about this check that it wrote that came back marked insufficient funds that never gets mentioned as a part of this speech. And so Dr. King, in a lot of his sermons, really talked about challenging the system. And students today are challenging the system. And to be honest, some in some mean-spirited ways. I know for a lot of presidents, this is a scary time for them. The president of Ithaca College finally said that he was going to retire in the next year or so, following the calls for the president and the chancellor for Mizzou to step down, which they did. We've seen viral videos of students going into libraries, disrupting and even threatening other students. They're presenting lists of demands. And the philosophy is we're not having a conversation. This is a demand, meaning if you don't meet this, there will be follow-up intensive action, which we'll see at Oberlin now because the president says, I'm not meeting these demands, and we'll have to follow that. The bigger issue for me is that we're living in an age where it's okay to be mean, and people have weak interpersonal skills. So it's easy to be mean these days. Social media, you can just troll people on social media and just say mean stuff to them and create some icon that's not you and some address and name that's not you. We have anonymous comments on news sites for stories or editorials, which I used to like back in the day. If you got something to say about an editorial I write, you write it to the paper, you give your name and your number, because that will cut out a lot of that. Because if you can't say it with your name on it, you need to keep your mouth shut. Don't come after me. Amen. On campuses, they've created these forums like Yik Yak so we can have anonymous attacks on people. I mean, it doesn't help because we're now in this political season, and it seems like we get points in the country for trying to show how mean and how tough we can be. How somebody's going to go kick ISIS's ass. My 9-year-old heard that. She was like, ooh, that lady said a bad word. How we're going to be tough and how we're going to go make the sand glow and carpet bomb people. This is the rhetoric that we're hearing. And so particularly in terms of the research on student development, students aren't able to have meaningful face-to-face contact anymore, and employers are saying that. On this campus, like most campuses, when you see your students walking on campus, this is what they look like. And usually there's some earphones in too. So when I'm walking on campus, I'm hollering at people, hey, stop, if I have to just grab my grabber. What's up? What's going on with you? Because we're doing this look, I'm guilty too. I'm in the airport. We don't want to be bothered. So we put up things and we don't know how to do that. Roommates have arguments now via text while they're in the room together. So with all of that, then you got folks talking about, I'm going to demand something. And we don't have those kinds of personal skills. Rapper Killer Mike, who's from Atlanta, like me, he went to the second best high school in Atlanta. I told him this. He spoke on my campus last year. People see him with Bernie Sanders, but he was working with one of my classes, and he started talking about Dr. King and the 6 steps of Kingian nonviolence. And of those 6 steps, step number 5 is direct action. It's a whole lot of stuff you're supposed to do before you start demanding stuff. You got to gather the information to know what you're talking about. Because people demand stuff and they don't know what they're talking about. As a student at UNC Chapel Hill, they interrupt this forum. We demand free tuition. Man, get out of here with that. Get out of here with that. What you talking about? Get out of here. So information gathering, and then the education that has to happen on top of that. Then what kind of personal commitment? Then negotiation. We go right to number 5. Direct action. And then forget that after number 5 is step 6, reconciliation. We're going to butt heads a little bit if we get to that part, but then after that, we got to form the community again. And we see folks out there demanding and protesting and doing that and not thinking about the relationship at all. And so we've got to create a situation where we develop community where we can have a full dialogue. And so creating community means we start with talking and we talk all the way through. On our campus, we had our board meeting in November. And outside the board meeting, some students gathered and they decided they were going to have a silent protest. And we were like, well, what's going on? I mean, our SGA and student leaders have a meeting with our board. Every board meeting, we have a student luncheon. And so they have a little silent protest, no problems happen. But the next day I asked some students to come talk to me. It's like, tell me sort of what happened. What were you guys thinking about? And some of them said, you know what? I think we sort of got caught up in the stuff that was happening all across the country and felt like, well, maybe we should have a show of things that we want to have happen. It wasn't big on, they were like, don't put it on social media. They were trying to, but then people felt bad about it. They were like, okay, so we have impacted the relationships. I'm like, you got some high impact people. And some of the guys who were out there, they saw me that Friday night. They were like, well, they ran out of tickets for the Dance Theater Harlem. Do you have tickets? I'm like, dude, you sitting outside my boardroom and now you're going to ask me for some tickets. And then next Thursday, you're going to be at my house for Thanksgiving dinner. So they heard from me for the whole week because they didn't even think about the relationship, and that's the thing I'm telling them, when you're in relationship with people, you can get more done, and particularly with me. You come demanding with me, I'm from Southwest Atlanta, I don't deal with that well. You have a relationship with me, you can get much more done in cultivating, but they don't know how to do that. So it's like, well, let's just say we're doing something and not deal with the relationships, even though they had the relationships to get everything done that they wanted to do. So we've got to think about how do we create this kind of environment that we move from demanding to dialogue. Well, finally, June 17, 2012, the day before we were moving from Little Rock to New Orleans, we were headed out to church, and on Twitter I saw that Rodney King's fiancée found him dead in the bottom of the pool. A cultural icon from my generation, referenced by many hip-hop artists like NWA and Public Enemy, who worried and expressed their concern about police brutality. His famous plea, "Can we all just get along?" in the midst of a rioting city, showed a shaken man, a victim of brutality, still showing concern for his fellow man and woman. Indeed, "Can we get along?" is just a powerful call to action. By no means was Rodney King perfect. Arrested, jail time, drugs, alcohol. But we can still work to make his dream, and extension, Dr. King's dream, come true. First, we have to help people learn how to love themselves, because there are lots of hurt people and then they end up hurting other people. Secondly, those of us better situated have to get ourselves right so that we can see others who are in pain and stop ignoring them like they don't exist. And then finally, we've got to have more dialogue with each other, face to face, intentional, intense, and intimate. King's dream sometimes has been hijacked by corporate America, conservatives, and simple folks looking for a feel-good phrase. We've never understood the depth of the man and his message by all the sound bites that we do that simply soften his call to us. But Rodney King had a dream too. And maybe this openly imperfect man, himself a symbol of broken families, drugs, crime, and unemployment, will be powerful enough for us to work to build better communities, a better campus. In a 1967 sermon, "Where Do We Go From Here?" King said, "Let us be dissatisfied. And men will recognize that out of one blood, God made all men to dwell upon the face of the earth. Let us be dissatisfied until the day when no one will shout white power, when nobody will shout black power, but everybody will talk about God's power and human power." For today, let us be dissatisfied until we create a community here and on all college campuses, willing to love each other and challenge each other in love so that we never have to ask ourselves, can we all just get along?